The rifle crack split the desert air before Garrett Rawlins even saw the girl. Garrett Rawlins was 41, built like a man who'd spent his life in the saddle. 6 feet tall, broad across the shoulders, with dark hair going silver at the temples. His face bore the deep lines of a man who'd seen too much sun and too much sorrow. Steel gray eyes, a faded scar along his jaw from a cavalry skirmish, hands that were more callous than skin. He wore simple working clothes, a weathered Stetson, and the quiet authority of a man who'd commanded troops before he commanded cattle. He pulled hard on the reins, his gelding snorting and stamping in the dust. The sound had come from the canyon below, sharp and violent, echoing off the red stone walls like a warning from God himself. Garrett had been driving cattle through this stretch of Arizona territory for 15 years, and he knew the difference between a hunter's shot and something darker. This was darker. He dismounted in one fluid motion, his boots hitting the ground with a thud that sent a lizard skittering into the rocks. The November sun hung low and merciless in the sky, turning everything to shades of copper and blood. Garrett moved to the canyon's edge and looked down. 3 men on horseback circled something in the narrow wash below. Bounty hunters, by the look of them. Hard men with harder eyes, the kind who tracked fugitives for money and asked questions never. They had their quarry cornered against a rock face, a small figure in torn clothing, dark hair whipping in the wind. An Apache. Garrett's hand went to the rifle on his saddle. Muscle memory from his cavalry days, though those days were long behind him. He was 41 now, a rancher, not a soldier. He had left that life 12 years ago when the Army could no longer protect the people he loved most. But old instincts died hard. He watched as the Apache darted left, impossibly fast, a blade flashing in her hand. Her hand. Garrett's eyes narrowed. The fugitive was a woman, young, seeing, and fierce, moving like a wildcat backed into a corner. She slashed at the nearest bounty hunter's horse, making it rear. The man cursed, fighting for control. Another shot rang out. The woman jerked, stumbled. Blood bloomed dark on her shoulder, but she did not fall. She pressed her back against the stone, chest heaving, the knife still raised in defiance. "That's far enough," Garrett called out, his voice carrying down into the canyon with the authority of a man who expected to be obeyed. The 3 bounty hunters twisted in their saddles, hands moving toward their weapons. The leader, a scarred man with a tobacco-stained beard, squinted up at Garrett. "This ain't your concern, friend," the man shouted back. "She's on my land," Garrett said evenly. "That makes it my concern. You're trespassing." The leader spat into the dust. "We got legal right. This here's a fugitive Apache, escaped from Fort Grant 3 days ago." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper, waving it like a flag. "There's a $200 reward for her capture, dead or alive." Garrett considered this. He looked at the woman again. She was watching him now, those amber eyes locked on his face, calculating. She was sizing him up the same way he was sizing her up, trying to determine if he was salvation or simply a different kind of threat. Blood dripped from her shoulder onto the sand. She was weakening. "How much did you say?" Garrett asked. The leader grinned, showing brown teeth. 200, but we caught her fair and square. She's ours." "Was yours," Garrett corrected. He pulled a leather wallet from his vest, counted out bills with deliberate slowness. 250, cash, right now." The grin faltered. "What?" "You heard me. I'll take her in myself tomorrow morning. Save you the trouble of keeping her alive overnight." Garrett held up the money so they could see it, crisp bills that represented a month's profit from cattle sales. "Or you can write off my property in the next 30 seconds and we forget this conversation happened." The 3 men exchanged glances. Greed warred with suspicion on their faces. Finally, the leader rode forward, snatched the bills from Garrett's hand, and counted them twice. "Your funeral, friend," he said. "That one's got the devil in her." He touched the brim of his hat in mock salute, then wheeled his horse around. "Let's ride, boys. Got drinking money now." They galloped off in a cloud of dust and laughter, leaving Garrett alone with the woman in the canyon. He waited until they were out of sight before making his way down the slope, his boots sliding on loose scrabble. The Apache woman tracked his every movement, her body coiled tight as a spring. When he was 10 feet away, she hissed something in her own language, a warning that needed no translation. Garrett stopped. He held up both hands, showing them empty. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said quietly. She did not lower the knife. Blood soaked through the fabric at her shoulder now, a spreading stain that told him the bullet had gone clean through. That was good. No lead to dig out. But she was losing too much blood, and the desert sun would finish what the bullet started if he did not act fast. "You understand English?" he asked. The woman's jaw tightened. She nodded once, a tiny movement. "Good. I'm going to come closer. I'm going to bandage that wound. Then we're going to have a conversation." Garrett took a slow step forward. "You can run after that if you want, but right now you're bleeding out, so let me help." She stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for lies. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she lowered the knife an inch. Not dropped, just lowered. Garrett closed the distance between them. Up close, he could see she was younger than he had first thought, mid-20s perhaps, with high cheekbones and skin the color of desert clay. Her hair hung in a long braid down her back, tangled with bits of sagebrush. The torn dress she wore had once been calico, now reduced to rags that barely covered her. She smelled like blood and fear and wild places. He pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket, pressed it against the wound. As he tied the bandage, his fingers brushed against old scar tissue on her right wrist. 3 parallel lines, faded with time, but distinctive. Claw marks. Bare, most likely. The scars were at least 15 years old, healed, but permanent. Something about them tugged at his memory, but Garrett couldn't place it. He had seen a lot of scars in his cavalry days. This was just another one, or so he told himself. She flinched, but did not cry out. Her eyes never left his face. "What's your name?" Garrett asked as he tied the makeshift bandage tight. She said nothing. "All right, don't have to tell me." He finished the knot, stepped back. "But I need to know why those men were hunting you. What did you do?" The woman's lips parted. When she spoke, her English was broken, shaped by an accent that turned the words into something almost musical. "I escape, Fort Grant. I gathered that much." "Why were you at Fort Grant?" Her expression hardened. "They take my brother. Say he kills soldier. Not true." Garrett had heard plenty of stories about Apache prisoners at the frontier forts. Some of them were warriors captured in battle. Others were just people in the wrong place at the wrong time, swept up in the Army's endless campaign to pacify the territory. "Your brother," Garrett repeated. "What's his name?" "Ashki." The word came out soft, reverent. "He's 17. Just boy. They say they hang him. 30 days. 30 days. That was a death sentence on a clock. And you were trying to break him out?" She nodded, her whole body trembling now, whether from pain or emotion, Garrett could not tell. "I try, but too many soldiers. They catch me, put me in cage. Then I run." A fugitive Apache who assaulted a military installation. That would explain the bounty, and it would explain why those hunters had been so eager to bring her in. Dead or alive meant they could have just shot her and collected the reward. The fact they had not suggested they wanted the extra money that came with a live capture. Garrett studied her face, the fierce pride beneath the exhaustion, the way her hand still gripped the knife even though she was swaying on her feet. "Why should I believe you?" he asked. It was the question that mattered, because if he was going to do what he was already considering, he needed to know the truth. The woman met his gaze, and something shifted in her expression. The hardness cracked just for a second, and he saw the grief beneath. "Because you lost family too," she whispered. "I see in your eyes." Garrett felt the words hit him like a physical blow. He turned away, jaw clenched, fighting the old familiar ache that lived in his chest where his heart used to be. She was right. She could see it. 12 years of carrying that weight, and a stranger could read it on his face like words carved in stone. He had lost everything. His wife, Sarah. His son, Daniel, just 6 years old, with his mother's laugh and his father's stubborn chin. They had died in an Apache raid on their homestead while Garrett was away on patrol, doing his duty, protecting other people's families while his own burned. The Army had called it a tragedy. They had given Garrett an honorable discharge and a pension. They had not given him back his wife and child. He turned back to the woman. She was watching him with something that might have been understanding or might have been calculation. It was hard to tell. "If your brother is innocent," Garrett said slowly, "then someone at Fort Grant is lying." "Yes." She swayed, caught herself against the rock. "Sergeant, name Virgil Kane. He kills soldier. Make Ashkey. Take blame. Virgil Kane." The name hit Garrett like ice water down his spine. He went very still. "Say that again," he said quietly. "Virgil Kane," she repeated, confused by his reaction. "You know him?" Know him. Yes, Garrett knew him. Sergeant Virgil Kane had been the one who rode to the fort that day 12 years ago, the one who brought the news that Garrett's homestead had been attacked. Kane had stood in the commander's office with his hat in his hands, his face carefully arranged in an expression of sympathy, and said the words that shattered Garrett's world. "I'm sorry, Lieutenant, we got there as fast as we could, but it was too late." Garrett had believed him, had thanked him, even, through the fog of his grief. Had never questioned why Kane had been the one to discover the bodies, why he had been riding that direction in the first place, why his uniform had been so clean when everyone else who responded to the scene had been covered in ash and blood. He had never questioned because he had been drowning, and you do not ask questions when you are drowning, you just sink. But now, standing in this canyon with a wounded Apache woman who claimed Kane was a liar and a murderer, Garrett felt something shift in the foundation of his grief, a crack in the story he had been telling himself for 12 years. "Draw him," Garrett said suddenly. The woman blinked. "What?" "Kane, draw his face. Can you do that?" She hesitated, then nodded. Garrett pulled a small notebook and pencil from his pocket, the kind he used to track cattle counts and fence repairs. He handed them to her. She took them awkwardly, her injured arm hanging limp at her side, and began to sketch. Her hand moved with surprising skill, despite the pain she must have been in. Quick, decisive strokes. She was not trained, but she had an eye for detail. In less than a minute, a face emerged on the paper. Narrow eyes, a thin mouth, a distinctive scar along the jawline. Garrett stared at the drawing. It was Kane, unmistakably. Right down to the scar he had gotten in a barroom fight in Tucson. And the woman had never met Garrett before today. She could not have known which sergeant to name, which face to draw, unless she was telling the truth about Kane being at Fort Grant. About Kane being involved. "When did this happen?" Garrett asked, his voice rough. "When did Kane kill the soldier?" 3 weeks ago," she said. "Soldier name David Fletcher. Good man. He see Kane, sell guns to banditos. Kane shoot him, make look like Ashkey do it. David Fletcher." The name meant nothing to Garrett, but the gun running did. He had heard rumors over the years, whispers of Army weapons ending up in the wrong hands, of sergeants supplementing their pay with illegal sales to whoever had the cash. He had always dismissed them as gossip. But what if they were not gossip? What if Kane had been profiting off the chaos of the frontier for years? And what if 12 years ago Kane had known about the Apache raid in advance? What if Kane had let it happen? Because dead settlers meant more fear, and more fear meant more Army funding, and more funding meant more opportunities for men like Kane to skim off the top. Garrett felt his hands begin to shake. He clenched them into fists. "What's your name?" he asked again, quieter this time. The woman looked at him for a long moment. Then, as if deciding he had earned the truth, she answered, "Ayasha." "Ayasha." Garrett tested the word, the sound of it unfamiliar but not unpleasant. "I'm Garrett Rollins. I have a ranch about 10 miles north of here." He paused, weighing his next words carefully. "Those bounty hunters think I'm going to turn you in tomorrow. I'm not." Hope flared in her eyes, quickly smothered by suspicion. "Why?" "Because if you're telling the truth about Kane, then we have the same enemy." Garrett picked up his rifle, slung it over his shoulder. "And because 12 years ago, Virgil Kane was the man who told me my wife and son were dead. He rode to the fort to give me the news personally, and I never understood why." He extended his hand to Ayesha. She stared at it, then at his face, searching for the trap. "I can't promise I can save your brother," Garrett said. "But I can promise I'll try to find out the truth. About Kane. About what really happened to that soldier. And maybe," his voice caught, "maybe about what happened to my family." Ayesha looked at his hand for another long moment. Then, slowly, she reached out and grasped it. Her grip was surprisingly strong despite the blood loss, her palm rough with calluses. Garrett pulled her to her feet. She swayed, and he caught her elbow to steady her. "Can you ride?" he asked. She nodded, though her face had gone pale. "Good. We need to move before those hunters decide $250 wasn't enough." He led her up the slope to where his horse waited, patient and steady. "There's water in the canteen. Drink. We have a long ride ahead." Ayesha did as she was told, her movements slow and pained. When she finished drinking, Garrett helped her into the saddle, then swung up behind her. She stiffened at the proximity, every muscle in her body going rigid. "Relax," Garrett said quietly. "If I wanted to hurt you, I would have let those men take you." She did not relax, but she did not fight him either. Garrett took the reins and turned the horse north, toward home, toward whatever answers waited there. The sun was setting now, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. They rode in silence, the only sounds the steady rhythm of hoofbeats and Ayesha's labored breathing. She was fading, the blood loss and exhaustion catching up to her. Twice she slumped back against Garrett's chest, and twice she jerked herself upright, refusing to show weakness. The third time, Garrett spoke. "You can rest," he said. "I won't let you fall." Ayesha turned her head slightly, enough that he could see her profile against the dying light. "You promise?" It was such a small question, asked in such a small voice, that Garrett felt something crack open inside him. This woman, this fierce Apache warrior who had tried to break into a military fort to save her brother, who had fought off bounty hunters with a knife and a prayer, was asking him for a promise, asking him if she could trust him. He thought about Sarah, about the promises he had made to her on their wedding day, to love her, to protect her, to keep her safe, promises he had failed to keep. He thought about Daniel, about the way his son had looked up at him with absolute faith, believing his father could fix anything, stop anything, save anyone. Faith that had been misplaced. Garrett Rollins was not a man who made promises lightly anymore. He knew too well what it cost when you broke them. But he looked at Ayesha, at the blood soaking through the bandage on her shoulder, at the exhaustion carved into every line of her body, at the desperate hope in her eyes, and he heard himself say, "I promise." And this time, he meant to keep it. They reached Rollins Ranch just after midnight, when the stars hung so thick overhead they looked like spilled salt across black velvet. The ranch house sat dark and silent, a low adobe structure with a wide porch and shuttered windows. Beyond it, the barn loomed like a sleeping giant, and past that, the corrals where Garrett's cattle dozed standing up, their breath misting in the cold desert night. Ayesha had lost consciousness about an hour back. Garrett had felt her go limp against him, her head lolling onto his shoulder, her breathing shallow and fast. Fever was setting in. The wound needed proper cleaning, proper bandaging, and she needed rest. He dismounted carefully, then lifted Ayesha down from the saddle. She was lighter than he expected, all lean muscle and bone, no extra weight to spare. He carried her toward the house, his boots crunching on the gravel path. The front door opened before he reached it. A woman stood silhouetted in the doorway, lamp in hand, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. Mrs. Helen Carter, 64 years old and tougher than boot leather, who had been keeping house for Garrett since his wife died. She took one look at Ayesha in Garrett's arms and stepped aside without a word. "Apache," Helen said flatly. It was not a question. "Yes." "Bounty hunters?" "Paid them off." Helen set the lamp down on the kitchen table, already moving to gather supplies. Clean water, bandages, whiskey for sterilization. She had been a teacher at the San Carlos Reservation for 3 years before her husband died, and she came to work for Garrett. She knew Apache people, knew their language, knew how to treat them like human beings instead of curiosities or threats. "Put her in the spare room," Helen instructed. "I'll need better light to see what we're dealing with." Garrett carried Ayesha down the hall to the small room that had once been meant for guests, back when Sarah was alive and they still entertained the idea of visitors. He laid her on the bed as gently as he could. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "Where?" she whispered. "Safe," Garrett said. "You're safe." Helen bustled in with her arms full of supplies, set them down on the nightstand, and shooed Garrett toward the door. "Out! I need to undress her to clean that wound properly." "I can help." "Out!" Helen repeated more firmly this time. "She doesn't need a strange man hovering over her half-naked. Go check on the stock or something. I'll call you when I'm done." Garrett hesitated, then nodded. He stepped out into the hall, pulled the door shut behind him, and stood there for a moment, listening to the murmur of Helen's voice, speaking soothing words in Apache. He should check on the cattle, should unsaddle his horse, should do any of a dozen tasks that needed doing on a working ranch. Instead, he walked to his study, a cramped room lined with books he never read anymore, and pulled open the bottom drawer of his desk. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a daguerreotype in a silver frame. Sarah and Daniel, taken 6 months before they died. Sarah sat in a chair with Daniel on her lap, both of them trying not to smile because the photographer had told them to stay still, but you could see the laughter in their eyes. Garrett set the photograph on his desk, stared at it in the lamplight. Sarah had been 28 when she died. Dark hair, dark eyes, a smile that could light up a room. Daniel had looked like her, all except for his eyes, which were Garrett's blue. "I think I might have made a mistake tonight," Garrett said to the photograph, his voice quiet in the empty room. "I brought someone into our home, someone who might be lying, someone who might get me killed." He paused. "Or someone who might help me find out the truth about what happened to you." The photograph offered no answers. It never did. A knock on the doorframe made him turn. Helen stood there, wiping her hands on a cloth stained with blood and iodine. "She'll live," Helen said. "Bullet went clean through, like you thought. I cleaned it out, stitched her up. She's strong. She'll heal if infection doesn't set in." She paused. "Garrett, she's covered in scars, old ones. This girl has been through hell." "I know." "Do you?" Helen's gaze was sharp. "Because I'm wondering why you brought her here instead of taking her to the fort like you told those bounty hunters you would." Garrett told her. All of it. The canyon, the drawing, Virgil Kane's name, the story about Ayesha's brother, and the murdered soldier. When he finished, Helen was quiet for a long time. "That's a serious accusation," she finally said. "Accusing an Army sergeant of murder and gun running. I know. If you're wrong, you've harbored a fugitive. They could arrest you. Take your ranch." "I know that too." Helen studied his face. "But you don't think you're wrong?" "No," Garrett said quietly. "I don't. Something about Kane never sat right with me. I just couldn't see it before. I was too—" he trailed off. "Too grief-stricken to ask questions," Helen finished. "Garrett, you were a good soldier, and you're a good man. But sometimes good men are blind to evil, especially when it wears a uniform." She folded the bloody cloth, set it aside. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to find out the truth. About David Fletcher, about Kane, about what really happened 12 years ago. And if the truth is ugly, then at least I'll know." Helen nodded slowly. "That girl in there, she asked me something while I was bandaging her. She asked if you were trustworthy. I told her yes. Don't make me a liar, Garrett Rollins." She left him alone with the photograph and his thoughts. Garrett did not sleep that night. He sat in his study, making lists, forming plans, trying to figure out how a rancher with no authority and no resources was supposed to investigate a potential conspiracy involving the United States Army. By the time the sun rose, he had filled 3 pages with notes and crossed out most of them. The sound of voices in the kitchen drew him out of his chair. He walked down the hall, found Helen at the stove making coffee, and Tom Fletcher standing by the table looking like he had seen a ghost. Tom was 58, built like a bull, with gray shot through his dark hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite with a dull chisel. He had been Garrett's sergeant back in the cavalry days, had saved Garrett's life twice in skirmishes with hostiles, and had followed him into civilian life when Garrett left the service. Tom was foreman of the ranch now, and the closest thing Garrett had to family. He was also staring at the hallway that led to the spare room where Ayesha slept, his expression unreadable. "Morning, Tom," Garrett said carefully. Tom turned that stare on him. "Helen says you brought an Apache into this house." "I did." "Why?" Garrett poured himself coffee, took a long drink, felt the bitterness scald his throat. Then he told Tom the same story he had told Helen. But this time, when he mentioned David Fletcher's name, Tom's face went white. The big man sat down heavily in a chair, his hands shaking. "Tom," Garrett set his cup down. "What is it?" Tom's voice came out rough, broken. "David Fletcher was my sister's boy. My nephew." The words hung in the air like smoke from a gun barrel. Garrett felt the floor shift beneath him. Of course, Fletcher was not an uncommon name in the territory, but now that Tom said it, Garrett remembered. Tom's sister had married a man named William Fletcher, had moved to Tucson, had a son. Garrett had met the boy once, years ago, a serious kid with his father's height and his mother's eyes. "David joined the Army 2 years ago," Tom continued, his voice hollow, "against his mother's wishes. Said he wanted to make a difference. Last letter we got from him was 3 months back. He said he was stationed at Fort Grant, said he was doing good work." Tom looked up at Garrett, and there were tears in his eyes now. "Are you telling me he's dead?" "I don't know," Garrett said honestly. "But that's what Ayesha claims. She says Cain killed him. Says David saw something he shouldn't have." Tom's hands curled into fists on the table. "That Apache girl. She's lying. She has to be lying. Why would she lie about the name? How would she even know to say David Fletcher if it wasn't true?" "I don't know." Tom stood abruptly, the chair scraping loud against the floor. "But I know Apaches. I fought them for 15 years. They lie, they steal, they kill. That's what they do." His voice rose. "And you bring one into this house? Into Sarah's house?" "Tom," Garrett kept his voice level, "I need you to calm down." "Calm down? My nephew is dead and you're protecting the people who killed him." "We don't know who killed him. That's what we need to find out." "We?" Tom laughed, bitter and sharp. "There's no we in this, Garrett. This is you making a damn fool decision because you feel guilty about Sarah and Daniel." He jabbed a finger toward the hallway. "That Apache in there? She's using you. And when she's done, she'll slit your throat and disappear into the desert." Before Garrett could respond, a voice came from the hallway, quiet, accented, exhausted. "I not kill your nephew." They both turned. Ayesha stood in the doorway, leaning heavily against the frame. She had changed into one of Helen's spare dresses, too big on her thin frame, and her left arm was in a sling. Her face was pale, sweat beading on her forehead, but her eyes were clear and steady. "David Fletcher," she continued, her English halting but determined. "Good man. He kind to Apache prisoners. Give us extra water, extra food. When I try escape, he not shoot. He let me go." Her voice broke. "Cain kill him. Not me. Not Ashke. Cain." Tom stared at her, his jaw working. "You expect me to believe that?" "I not care what you believe." Ayesha pushed herself upright, swaying but refusing to fall. "But David Fletcher, he die because he good, because he try to stop Cain. He die protecting truth." She met Tom's gaze. "You want hate me? Hate me. But your nephew, He deserved justice, not hate. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Finally, Tom turned to Garrett. "I'm going to Fort Grant. Today, I'm going to see the records, the death certificate, the incident report, all of it." His voice was granite. "And if I find out she's lying, God help her. God help both of you." He strode out of the house, slamming the door behind him hard enough to rattle the windows. Garrett watched him go, then looked at Ayesha. "You shouldn't be out of bed." "I hear yelling." She touched the doorframe for support. "He hate me. He's grieving, and scared, and angry. That's a dangerous combination." "You not angry?" Garrett considered the question. Was he angry? Yes, but not at her. At Cain, if the story was true. At himself for not seeing it sooner. At the world for taking everything he loved and leaving him with nothing but questions and ghosts. "I'm tired of being angry," he said finally. "Anger doesn't bring anyone back." Ayesha studied his face, and something in her expression softened. "You? Good man. Like David." "I'm not good. I'm just trying to do the right thing for once." She took a step toward him, winced as the movement pulled at her stitches. Garrett moved to catch her, but she waved him off. "I walk. Need to walk. Make strong. You need to rest. Helen's orders. Helen, not Apache." A ghost of a smile crossed Ayesha's face. "Apache women. We strong. We heal fast." "You were shot yesterday." "Yes. And today, I walk." She moved past him into the kitchen, her gait unsteady but determined. Helen appeared from the pantry, took one look at Ayesha, and sighed. "Stubborn, just like I thought. Just, all right, girl. You want to walk? You walk. But you sit down to eat breakfast first, or I'll tie you to that chair myself." Ayesha sat. Helen put a plate of eggs and bread in front of her, and Ayesha ate slowly, methodically, like someone who had known too much hunger to waste a single bite. Garrett watched her, this stranger who had crashed into his carefully ordered life, and wondered if Tom was right. Was he being a fool? Was he projecting his own need for answers onto a situation that did not involve him? But then he remembered the drawing, the perfect rendering of Virgil Cain's face, scars and all. And he remembered the look in Cain's eyes 12 years ago when he delivered the news about Sarah and Daniel. Not quite sad enough, not quite surprised enough. Like a man who already knew what he was going to find when he rode out to that homestead. "Ayesha," Garrett said quietly, "when Tom gets back from Fort Grant, things are going to get complicated. He might bring the army. He might bring the law. And if he does, I need to know something." He paused. "Is there anything else you haven't told me? Anything that could change the story?" She set down her fork, met his gaze. "There, one thing." Garrett's stomach tightened. "What?" "When I escaped Fort Grant, I not alone at first." Her voice dropped. "There was other Apache woman, older. She helped me. She—" Ayesha swallowed hard. "Soldiers shoot her. She die, so I could run." "What was her name?" "Desba." Ayesha's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "She was like mother to me. After my real mother die, she teach me English, teach me how to survive." Her hands clenched into fists on the table. "Cain kill her too. He give order to shoot. He laugh when she fall." The rage that swept through Garrett was cold and precise, the kind of rage he had not felt since the day he buried his wife and son. It was not the hot, chaotic anger of grief. It was the calculated fury of a man who had found his purpose again after 12 years of drifting. "Then we're going to make him answer for it," Garrett said. "All of it. David Fletcher, Desba, and maybe," he hesitated, "maybe Sarah and Daniel too." Ayesha reached across the table, placed her hand over his. Her skin was warm, her grip surprisingly gentle. "We find truth," she said, "together." And in that moment, sitting in his kitchen with an Apache fugitive and a housekeeper who had seen too much, Garrett Rollins made a choice. Not the safe choice, not the smart choice, but the only choice he could live with. He was going to war with Virgil Kane, and this time he was not going to lose. 3 days passed before Tom Fletcher returned from Fort Grant. 3 days during which Ayesha's wound began to heal, the fever breaking on the second night, her strength returning in increments that amazed even Helen. 3 days during which Garrett paced his ranch like a caged animal, waiting for news, waiting for answers, waiting for the inevitable confrontation he knew was coming. On the morning of the 4th day, Tom rode in just after dawn, his horse lathered with sweat, his face carved from stone. He dismounted in the yard, handed the reins to Jesse Morgan, the young ranch hand who had been watching the horizon for him, and walked straight to the house without a word. Garrett met him on the porch. Behind him, through the open door, Ayesha sat at the kitchen table with Helen, pretending to sip coffee while watching Tom with the wariness of a deer scenting wolves. Tom stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 3 days. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw covered in stubble, his clothes rumpled from sleeping in them. "Tell me," Garrett said quietly. Tom pulled a folded paper from inside his coat, held it out. His hand shook. "Death certificate, Private David Fletcher. Died October 15th, 1884. Cause of death, gunshot wound to the back." He paused, his voice cracking. "To the back, Garrett. My nephew was shot in the back." Garrett took the paper, scanned it. The official Army seal, the doctor's signature, the clinical description of wounds that had ended a young man's life. But it was the note at the bottom that made his blood run cold. Witness statement, Sergeant Virgil Kane. "There was a trial," Tom continued, his voice hollow, "lasted half a day. Apache boy named Ashkey, 17 years old, accused of murder. Kane testified he saw the whole thing, said the Apache grabbed a rifle, shot David when his back was turned, then tried to run. Said he had to restrain the boy himself." Tom's hands clenched into fists. "Open and shut case. They convicted him in an hour. Set execution for November 10th. That's 17 days from now. 17 days. Garrett pulled out his pocket watch, checked the date. October 24th. November 10th was circled in his mind now, a deadline written in blood. 17 days to find evidence. 17 days to convince the Army. 17 days before an innocent boy died for a crime he didn't commit. "We're running out of time," Ayesha whispered, her voice breaking. 17 days is not enough." "It has to be enough," Garrett said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. "We make it enough." 17 days. The number hung in the air like a noose. "Did you see the ballistics report?" Garrett asked. Tom's expression shifted, something flickering across his face. Doubt. Confusion. "I saw it. And that's the thing that doesn't make sense." He pulled another paper from his coat, this one more worn, like it had been read and reread a dozen times. The doctor who examined David noted the angle of the wound, said the bullet entered from behind and below, traveling upward through the chest cavity. Garrett frowned. Below, as in the shooter was lower than David? Or kneeling? Or, Tom met his gaze, or David was standing, and the shooter was a 17-year-old Apache boy who's 5'6", according to his intake report. How tall was David? 6'2", just like his father. Tom's voice broke. "The angles don't match, Garrett. If Ashkey shot David face to face and David turned to run, the bullet would have traveled level or downward, not upward." He crumpled the paper in his fist. Something's wrong with Kane's testimony. Something's real wrong. Behind them, Ayesha stood up from the table, moved to the doorway. Her voice was soft but steady. "I tell you, Kane killed David, not Ashkey. Ashkey was holding supplies, his hands full. No gun." Tom turned to look at her, and for the first time there was no hatred in his eyes, just exhaustion and grief and a terrible dawning understanding. "There's more," Tom said. "I went through David's personal effects. The Army had them boxed up, waiting to be sent to his mother. I told them I'd take them." He reached into his coat again, pulled out a small leather journal. David kept a diary. Last entry was 2 days before he died. He opened it to a marked page, handed it to Garrett. The handwriting was neat, careful, the words of a young man trying to make sense of the world around him. October 13th, 1884. Saw Sergeant Kane at the trading post today with men I didn't recognize. Rough types, bandito-looking. He was loading crates into their wagon, crates with U.S. Army stamps, rifles, at least 20 Winchesters. When I asked what he was doing, Kane told me to mind my own business. Told me if I knew what was good for me, I'd forget what I saw. But I can't forget. Those are Army weapons, our weapons, going to God knows who. October 14th, 1884. Confronted Kane this morning at the fort. Told him I was going to report what I saw unless he could explain it. He laughed in my face. Said no one would believe a green private over a decorated sergeant. Said accidents happen to soldiers who don't know when to keep their mouths shut. I'm writing to Mr. Garrett Rollins tonight. Uncle Tom says he's a good man. If something happens to me, someone needs to know the truth. The entry ended there. No entry for October 15th. That was the day David Fletcher died. Garrett closed the journal, felt something cold and hard settle in his chest. Gun running, just like Ayesha said. There's one more thing. Tom's voice had gone quiet, almost a whisper. I found this tucked in the back of the journal. David must have written it, but never had a chance to send it. He handed Garrett a folded letter. The address line read, Lieutenant Garrett Rollins, but it had been crossed out and rewritten, Mr. Garrett Rollins, Rollins Ranch. Garrett's hands shook as he unfolded it. Mr. Rollins, you don't know me, but I know of you. My Uncle Tom Fletcher served under you in the cavalry. He speaks highly of you, says you're a man who values truth and justice. I'm writing because I've discovered something at Fort Grant that I believe you should know about. It concerns Sergeant Virgil Kane and an incident from 12 years ago, the raid on your homestead. Sir, I think Kane knew about it beforehand. I found a report in the old files, a scout's warning about Apache war parties moving south. The report was dated 2 days before your family was killed. Kane was the duty officer that day. He should have sent riders to warn the homesteads. He didn't. I don't know why he would do such a thing, but I think you deserve to know. I'm going to confront him tomorrow. If anything happens to me... The letter ended there, unfinished, unsent. Garrett read it twice, then a third time, the words blurring as his vision tunneled. Kane had known. 2 days in advance, Kane had known that Apache war parties were riding south toward the scattered homesteads where families lived unprotected, and he had done nothing. He had let them die. He had let Sarah die, let Daniel die, not through incompetence, through choice. Why? The word came out of Garrett like broken glass. Why would he do that? Tom's face was grim. I asked around at the fort, quiet-like. Found an old clerk who's been there since before your time. He said the year your family died, there was a big increase in Army funding for the territory. Congress authorized double the budget because of the Apache threat. More money meant more supplies, more weapons, more everything. He paused. More opportunities for men like Kane to skim off the top, to build their little empires. He let my family die for money. Garrett's voice was eerily calm, the kind of calm that comes before a storm breaks. He let Sarah and Daniel burn so he could pad his pockets. We don't know that for certain, Tom said, but there was no conviction in his words. Yes, we do. Garrett looked at Ayesha, saw the understanding in her eyes, the shared weight of knowing what evil men were capable of when they thought no one was watching. And David figured it out, so Kane killed him and framed Ashkey to cover his tracks. If we take this to the Army, they'll investigate, Tom said. They'll have to. And how long will that take? Garrett asked. Weeks? Months? Ashkey hangs in 17 days, Tom. By the time Army bureaucracy gets around to questioning Kane's testimony, that boy will be in the ground. So what do you suggest? Garrett walked to the edge of the porch, looked out at the land he had built his new life on, the land that had been supposed to help him forget. The morning sun painted everything gold, beautiful, and indifferent to human suffering. We get proof, he said, real proof, not just suspicions and coincidences. We find evidence of Kane's gun-running operation. We get someone to testify against him, and then we make sure Ashkey lives long enough for the truth to matter. How? We go to Kane's trading post. We see what's really in those crates. Tom was quiet for a long moment. That's breaking and entering. Maybe theft. Definitely illegal. I know. If we get caught, we'll be arrested. Could lose everything. I know that too. Tom looked at him, really looked at him, like he was seeing Garrett clearly for the first time in 12 years. This isn't just about saving that Apache boy, is it? No, Garrett admitted. It's not. You want revenge. I want justice. There's a difference. Is there? Tom's gaze was unflinching. Because from where I'm standing, they look an awful lot alike. Garrett turned to face him. Tom, you don't have to come with me. This is my fight. My ghosts to lay to rest. You have the ranch to think about, your own life. I won't ask you to risk that. Tom was silent for so long that Garrett thought he might walk away. Then the older man sighed, long and heavy. David was my nephew, my sister's only child. And if what we think is true, then Kane took him from her, the same way he took Sarah and Daniel from you. He met Garrett's eyes. I'm coming with you, not for revenge, for David. So his mother knows her boy didn't die for nothing. From the doorway, Ayesha spoke. I come too. Both men turned to her. She stood straight despite the sling on her arm, her chin raised, her eyes fierce. No, Garrett said firmly. You're still healing, and if things go bad, you'll be the first one they blame. My brother in cage, Ayesha said, her English clearer now after days of practice with Helen. 17 days until they kill him. You think I stay here? Drink tea? Wait? She shook her head. No, I come. I help. Ayesha, I know Kane's trading post, she continued. I see it. When they bring us from reservation to Fort Grant. I know where he keep things, where guards stand, where doors are. She stepped forward. You need me. You know this. Garrett looked at Tom, who shrugged. She's got a point. We're going in blind otherwise. Fine, Garrett said, though every instinct screamed at him to keep her safe, keep her away from danger. But she was right. They needed her knowledge, and more than that, she had earned the right to fight for her brother. But you follow my lead, both of you. We go in quiet, we get what we need, and we get out. No heroics, no unnecessary risks. When do we leave? Tom asked. Garrett pulled out his pocket watch, checked the time. Nearly 7 in the morning. We leave after dark. Kane's trading post is 40 miles east. If we ride hard, we can be there by midnight, when the town's asleep. And Jesse? Garrett glanced toward the barn, where Jesse Morgan was tending the horses, oblivious to the conversation happening on the porch. Jesse was 22, eager, loyal, and far too young to throw his life away on a mission that might end with all of them in prison or dead. Jesse stays here with Helen, Garrett said. Someone needs to keep the ranch running in case we don't come back. Tom nodded. I'll tell him. He won't like it, but he'll listen. The three of them spent the rest of the day preparing. Tom cleaned his rifle and checked his ammunition. Ayesha, against Helen's protests, practiced moving quietly with her injured arm, wincing but determined. Garrett went through his old cavalry gear, found his service revolver, the one he had not touched since the day he left the army. The weight of it in his hand felt familiar and terrible at the same time. Helen watched them all with the weary resignation of a woman who had seen too much violence in her life to be surprised by more. You're all fools, she said, as she packed food for their journey. But you're fools with a cause, I suppose. That's better than nothing. If we don't come back, Garrett said quietly, the ranch goes to Jesse. Everything's already written up with the lawyer in Copper Ridge. You'll be taken care of. Helen's hand stilled on the bread she was wrapping. Don't talk like that. I have to. You know I do. She turned to face him, her eyes bright with tears she refused to shed. Garrett Rawlins, I've watched you die inside for 12 years, watched you go through the motions of living without actually being alive. And now, finally, I see something in your eyes again. Purpose. Fire. She gripped his arm. So you come back, you hear me? You don't get to find yourself just to throw it all away." Garrett covered her hand with his. "I'll do my best. Your best better be damn good." As the sun set and darkness crept across the desert, Garrett, Tom, and Ayesha saddled their horses. Jesse stood by, his young face troubled, holding the reins of Tom's mount. "I should be going with you," Jesse said, for the third time. "No," Garrett said, gently but firmly. "You should be here protecting Helen and the ranch. That's just as important." "But, Jesse," Tom put a hand on the young man's shoulder. "When I was your age, I wanted to be in every fight, prove myself in every battle. You know what I learned? Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stay behind and guard what matters. Can you do that for us?" Jesse's jaw worked, but he nodded. "Yes, sir." "Good man." They rode out as the last light faded from the sky, 3 riders heading east into the darkness, chasing ghosts and truth in equal measure. The desert at night was a different world, cold and vast, full of sounds that made the horses nervous. Coyotes sang in the distance. An owl called overhead, a ghostly presence in the darkness. They rode in silence for the first hour, each lost in their own thoughts. Then Ayesha, riding between Garrett and Tom, spoke. "When I was small," she said, her voice soft, "my father tell me story about Coyote and Crow. Coyote was hungry, wanted to eat Crow, but Crow was smart. Crow tell Coyote, 'If you eat me, you eat once. If you let me live, I show you where many rabbits hide. You eat forever.'" She paused. "Coyote let Crow live. Crow show him rabbits. They become friends? No, partners. They hunt together." "What's the moral?" Tom asked. "Sometimes enemy become ally," Ayesha said, "when both want same thing." She looked at Tom as she said it, and something passed between them. An understanding, a fragile bridge built over a chasm of grief and mistrust. "I'm sorry about your nephew," Ayesha said quietly. "David was good man. He deserved better death." Tom's throat worked. "So did your friend, Desba." He had learned the name from Helen, who had gotten it from Ayesha. "I'm sorry, too. Sorry for what Cain did, and sorry for hating you before I knew you." "Hate is easy," Ayesha said, echoing the words Garrett had spoken to her days before. "Forgiveness is hard, but my people say, hate is poison you drink, hoping enemy dies." They rode on through the night, the miles falling away beneath the horses' hooves. Around 11 they stopped to rest the animals and eat some of the food Helen had packed. They sat in a dry wash, speaking in whispers, checking their weapons one more time. "Cain's trading post is just outside Fort Grant," Tom said, sketching a rough map in the dirt with a stick. "It's a stand-alone building, 2 stories. He lives upstairs, runs the business downstairs. There's usually 1 or 2 hired men sleeping in the back, guarding the stock." "How do we get in without being seen?" Garrett asked. Ayesha leaned forward, studied the map. "Back door," she said, pointing. "Here, is always unlocked. Cain use it for secret deliveries. At night. I see this when I was prisoner. They bring me and others to work. Load wagons we not supposed to see, but we see. So we go in through the back, find the crates with the rifles, and get proof," Garrett said. "Photographs would be best, but we don't have a camera, so we take one of the rifles, match it to Army records." "That's theft," Tom pointed out. "It's evidence. The law might not see it that way. Then we'll deal with the law when the time comes." Garrett stood, brushed dirt from his pants. "Let's move. We've got 9 miles left." They reached the outskirts of the settlement around midnight. Cain's trading post sat at the edge of town, exactly as Tom had described it, a squat 2-story building with a painted sign that read, "Cain and Company, General Goods." There were no lights in the windows. The street was empty, the whole town asleep. They left the horses tied in a grove of cottonwoods a 1/4 mile away and approached on foot, Ayesha leading. Despite her injury, she moved like smoke through the darkness, utterly silent. Garrett and Tom followed, trying to match her stealth and failing. Every step seemed to crunch too loud. Every breath seemed to echo. But no one raised an alarm. They reached the back of the building. Ayesha was right. The door was unlocked. She pushed it open slowly, the hinges mercifully quiet, and they slipped inside. The back room was a storage area, crowded with crates and barrels and sacks of grain. Moonlight filtered through a high window, giving just enough illumination to see. Garrett pulled out a small lantern, lit it on the lowest setting, shielding the light with his coat. "There," Ayesha whispered, pointing to a stack of crates in the corner. They bore the unmistakable stamp of the United States Army. Garrett and Tom moved to the crates, pried the lid off the top one. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, were a dozen Winchester repeating rifles. New, well-oiled, deadly. Each one stamped with an Army serial number. "That's enough proof," Tom breathed. "Not yet." Garrett pulled one of the rifles out, checked the serial number against the light. "We need to document this. Tom, you have that paper and pencil?" Tom pulled out a small notebook, began copying down serial numbers. Garrett moved to check another crate. This one contained ammunition, thousands of rounds. "How much do you think this is worth?" Tom asked quietly. "On the black market? To bandits and renegades? Thousands of dollars." Garrett felt sick. More than enough to kill for. A sound from above made them all freeze. Footsteps. Someone walking across the floor upstairs. They looked at each other in the dim light, barely breathing. The footsteps moved toward the stairs. "Hide," Garrett mouthed. They scattered, Tom behind a stack of grain sacks, Garrett behind the crates. Ayesha, smaller and faster, slipped into the gap between two barrels. The door at the top of the stairs opened. Lamplight spilled down, and a figure descended. Garrett could see boots, trousers, a nightshirt. Then a face came into view as the man reached the bottom of the stairs. Virgil Kane. Older than Garrett remembered, grayer but unmistakably him. The same narrow eyes, the same thin mouth, the same scar along his jaw. He carried a lamp in one hand and a pistol in the other, moving cautiously into the storage room like a man who had heard something but was not sure what. Garrett's hand went to his own revolver. His heart hammered so loud he was certain Kane could hear it. Kane moved through the room, checking corners, peering behind crates. He was 3 feet from where Ayesha hid when he stopped, frowned, and bent down to examine something on the floor. The pry marks on the crate lid, fresh splinters where they had opened it. Kane's head snapped up, his eyes scanning the room with new intensity. "I know someone's in here," he called out, his voice sharp. "Come out now, and we can talk. Make me hunt you down and things get ugly." No one moved. Kane cocked his pistol, the sound terribly loud in the enclosed space. "I'm going to count to 3, then I start shooting. 1. Garrett's mind raced. If Kane started firing, someone could die. Tom, Ayesha, himself. And even if they killed Kane in the fight, they would be murderers, not truth-seekers. Everything they were trying to accomplish would die with him. 2. Garrett made a decision. He stood up, hands raised, stepping into the lamplight. "It's me, Kane, Garrett Rollins." Kane's eyes widened, then narrowed with recognition and calculation. "Lieutenant Rollins? Or I suppose it's Mr. now." The gun did not waver. "What are you doing in my property in the middle of the night?" "Looking for answers." "To what questions?" "About David Fletcher, about gun running, about a raid 12 years ago that you could have prevented." Garrett took a step forward. "About my wife and son Kane, the ones you let die." For just a moment something flickered across Kane's face. Surprise, maybe even fear. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by cold anger. "That's a hell of an accusation," Kane said quietly. "You have any proof?" "I'm standing in a room full of proof. Army rifles you're selling to the highest bidder. The same kind of operation that got David Fletcher killed when he tried to expose you." Kane laughed, bitter and sharp. "You think you're clever. You think you've figured it all out. But you don't know anything, Rollins. You're a washed-up soldier playing rancher, sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. I know enough, and I'm taking it to the Army." "No," Kane said flatly. "You're not." He raised the gun, aimed directly at Garrett's chest. And then Tom Fletcher stepped out from behind the grain sacks. His rifle pointed at Kane's head. "Put it down, Sergeant," Tom said, his voice deadly calm. Kane's eyes flicked to Tom, recognition dawning. "Fletcher, of course. Let me guess. Someone told you I killed your nephew?" "Someone showed me evidence you killed my nephew. That Apache boy killed David. It's in the official report." "The official report is a lie," Tom said, "and you know it." Kane's jaw tightened. For a long moment the three men stood frozen in a tableau of violence, waiting to happen. Then Ayesha stepped out from her hiding place, moving into the lamplight. Kane's eyes went to her, widened. "You," he breathed. "The Apache girl, the one who escaped." His lip curled. "Should have killed you when I had the chance." "You try," Ayesha said quietly. "You fail. Like you fail with David, like you fail with Desba. You kill and kill, but truth does not die." "Truth is what I say it is," Kane snapped. "I'm a decorated sergeant. You're a fugitive. He's a deserter who couldn't protect his own family. And you," he looked at Tom, "you're an old man who can't face the fact that his nephew died in the line of duty." He smiled, cold and sharp. "Who do you think they'll believe?" "They'll believe the evidence," Garrett said. "The rifles, David's journal, the ballistics that don't match your testimony. Circumstantial, hearsay, not enough to convict me of anything. Maybe not. But it's enough to start an investigation. Enough to delay Ashke's execution. And once people start looking closely at you, Kane, I think they'll find a lot more than gun running." Kane's expression shifted, calculation replacing bravado. He was weighing his options, running through scenarios, and Garrett could see the moment he made his choice. "You're right," Kane said suddenly, his voice changing, becoming conciliatory. "You're absolutely right. I've done terrible things, things I'm not proud of, and maybe it's time I answered for them." He lowered his gun slowly, carefully. "Let me just set this down. We can talk. We can work this out." "Keep your hands where we can see them," Tom ordered. Of course. Kane bent down, as if to place the gun on the floor. Then he spun faster than Garrett thought possible, bringing the gun back up and firing. Not at Garrett or Tom, but at Ayesha. The shot was deafening in the enclosed space, but Ayesha was already moving, her Apache reflexes saving her life. The bullet hit the barrel behind where she had been standing a heartbeat before, punching through the wood with a spray of splinters. Tom's rifle cracked a split second later. The shot took Kane in the shoulder, spinning him around. He fell against the crates, his own gun clattering to the floor. "Don't move!" Tom shouted, advancing with his rifle still aimed. But Kane was done fighting. He slumped against the crates, blood spreading dark across his nightshirt, his face twisted in pain and rage. Tom kept his rifle trained on Kane while Garrett moved forward cautiously. He kicked the fallen pistol away, then assessed the wound. The bullet had punched through Kane's left shoulder, missing the bone but tearing muscle. Painful, but not fatal. "We need to stop the bleeding," Garrett said. "Can't have him dying before he talks." Tom pulled a kerchief from his pocket, tossed it to Garrett. "Make it quick. We don't have much time." Garrett folded the cloth into a compress, pressed it hard against the entry wound. Kane hissed in pain, but didn't cry out. Whatever else the man was, he wasn't a coward. "Hold this," Garrett ordered, placing Kane's own right hand over the compress. Then he tore a strip from Kane's nightshirt, tied it tight around the shoulder to hold the bandage in place. "You idiots!" Kane gasped through gritted teeth. "You shot a United States Army sergeant. They'll hang you for this." "We'll take our chances," Garrett said. He grabbed Kane by his uninjured shoulder and hauled him upright. "And you're going to tell them everything. David Fletcher, the gun running, the raid 12 years ago, all of it." Kane laughed, the sound wet and painful. "You think I'm going to confess? Based on what? The word of a savage and 2 outlaws? Based on this." Garrett held up one of the rifles from the crate. "Army property in your possession. That's enough to start with." "That proves nothing. I could say I confiscated those from smugglers." "Then you won't mind if we take them to Fort Grant and have them check the serial numbers against their missing weapons inventory." Kane's face paled. "That's what I thought," Garrett said. He turned to Tom and Ayesha. "Tie him up. We're taking him with us." Where? Tom asked. Not to Fort Grant. There are too many people there who might be in Kane's pocket. Garrett's mind worked through the options. We take him to Copper Ridge, to Marshal Wyatt Donovan. He's federal law, not Army. He'll have to investigate. They bound Kane's hands and feet with rope from the storage room, gagged him to keep him quiet, and hauled him outside to where the horses waited. Kane fought the whole way, trying to shout through the gag, but his injured shoulder made him weak. As they were securing him to Tom's horse, Ayesha touched Garrett's arm. We did it, she said softly, her eyes bright in the moonlight. We get proof, we get Kane. We got lucky, Garrett corrected. If Tom hadn't stepped in when he did, if Kane's shot had been 6 inches to the left, you'd be dead right now. But I am not dead. She smiled, fierce and beautiful. I am alive. Ashki will live. Truth will live. She placed her hand over his heart, a gesture so intimate it made Garrett's breath catch. And you? You are alive too, finally. Garrett looked down at her, this woman who had crashed into his life 4 days ago and turned everything upside down. This Apache fugitive with amber eyes and scars on her wrists, and a brother in a cell waiting to die. This survivor who had seen the same darkness he had seen and somehow found the strength to keep fighting. And he realized that she was right. For the first time in 12 years, he felt alive. Not just going through the motions, not just existing. Actually, truly alive. We should go, Tom said, breaking the moment. Sun's going to be up in a few hours. We need to be far from here by then. They mounted up, Kane tied to Tom's saddle, and rode west toward Copper Ridge, toward justice or vengeance or whatever waited for them at the end of this long, dark road. Behind them, Kane's trading post sat silent and empty, its secrets spilled, its lies exposed. And somewhere 17 days away from a hanging, a 17-year-old Apache boy named Ashki slept in a cell, not knowing that 3 people who had never met him were riding through the night to save his life. They reached Copper Ridge as the sun crested the eastern hills, painting the desert in shades of copper and gold. The town was just beginning to wake, shopkeepers opening their doors, a few early risers moving along the dusty main street. Garrett, Tom, and Ayesha rode straight through the center of town with their prisoner, drawing stares and whispers that followed them like a wake. Virgil Kane, bound and gagged on Tom's horse, had stopped struggling hours ago. Blood had soaked through the makeshift bandage on his shoulder, and his face had gone pale with pain and blood loss. But his eyes still burned with hatred every time he looked at Garrett. The marshal's office sat at the end of the street, a squat adobe building with barred windows and a hitching post out front. Garrett dismounted first, his body aching from the long ride, and tied his horse. Tom and Ayesha followed suit. The door opened before they could knock. Marshal Wyatt Donovan stood in the doorway, a tall man in his late 40s with iron-gray hair and eyes the color of flint. He wore his badge pinned to a leather vest, and his hand rested on the grip of his holstered Colt. "Garrett Rollins," Wyatt said, his voice neutral. "Didn't expect to see you in town this early, or with company." His gaze moved to Kane, to the blood, to the ropes. "That's Sergeant Virgil Kane from Fort Grant." "It is," Garrett said. "And he's tied up on your horse because?" "Because he tried to kill us when we caught him red-handed with stolen Army rifles." Wyatt's expression did not change, but his eyes sharpened. "That's a serious accusation." "It's a serious crime." Garrett pulled the Winchester rifle from his saddlebag, the one they had taken from Kane's storage room. "Army issue. Serial number 07342. I'm betting if you check Fort Grant's inventory, you'll find it listed as missing." Wyatt took the rifle, examined it carefully. "I'll need more than one rifle to arrest a United States Army sergeant for gun running." "We have more. A whole room full of crates at Kane's trading post. Army weapons, Army ammunition, all waiting to be sold to the highest bidder." Tom stepped forward. "And we have testimony that Kane murdered my nephew, Private David Fletcher, when David discovered the operation." "Testimony from who?" "From me," Ayesha said quietly. Wyatt's gaze moved to her for the first time, really seeing her. His eyes narrowed. "You're Apache." "Yes." "And you were at Fort Grant?" "I was prisoner." "I escape." So you're a fugitive. Wyatt looked at Garrett. You're harboring a fugitive and bringing me a wounded Army sergeant with accusations based on the word of an escaped Apache prisoner? He shook his head. Garrett, I expected better from you. Then look at the evidence, Garrett said, keeping his voice level. Look at David Fletcher's journal. Look at the ballistics report from his death. Look at the serial numbers on those rifles. Don't take our word for it. Investigate. Wyatt was silent for a long moment, his lawman's instincts warring with his skepticism. Finally, he stepped back from the doorway. Bring him inside, and the rest of you come with him. We're going to sort this out proper. They hauled Kane off the horse and into the marshal's office. The interior was sparse, functional, a desk, a few chairs, a gun rack on the wall, and in the back, 2 cells with iron bars. Wyatt directed them to dump Kane in one of the cells, then locked the door. Kane immediately ripped the gag from his mouth. Marshal Donovan, I demand you arrest these people. They assaulted me, shot me, kidnapped me from my own property. They're criminals. I'll get to you in a minute, Sergeant, Wyatt said calmly. He turned to Garrett. Now, from the beginning. And don't leave anything out. So Garrett told him everything. The canyon where he found Ayasha, the bounty hunters, the story about Ashki and David Fletcher, Tom's discovery at Fort Grant, the journal entry about the raid 12 years ago, the midnight trip to Kane's trading post, the confrontation, the shooting. He laid it all out like cards on a table, knowing that his freedom, Ayasha's life, and Ashkai's chance at justice all depended on whether this lawman believed him. When he finished, Wyatt sat back in his chair, his expression unreadable. That's quite a story. It's the truth. Truth is a slippery thing out here, Garrett. You know that. Wyatt pulled out a pipe, packed it with tobacco, lit it. Let's say I believe you. Let's say Kane is dirty. That still doesn't give you the right to take the law into your own hands. We tried doing it legally, Tom interjected. I went to Fort Grant, looked at the official records. Everything was whitewashed. Kane's testimony was taken as gospel. No one questioned the angles, the timeline, anything. That boy is going to hang in 16 days for a murder he didn't commit, and the Army isn't going to lift a finger to stop it. So you decided to become vigilantes. We decided to get evidence, Garrett said, the kind that can't be ignored or buried. Wyatt puffed on his pipe, smoke curling toward the ceiling. From the cell, Kane shouted, They're lying, Marshal, every word. That Apache girl is a savage who tried to kill me. These 2 broke into my property and stole from me. I'm the victim here. Quiet, Wyatt said without looking at him. He stood, walked to the window, looked out at the street. Here's my problem. I'm a federal marshal. My jurisdiction covers territorial law, not military law. What happens at Fort Grant, what happens to Apache prisoners, that's Army business. I can't just walk in and overturn a military conviction. Garrett felt his stomach drop. So you're saying there's nothing you can do? I'm saying it's complicated. Wyatt turned back to face them. But if there's evidence of a crime committed in my jurisdiction, gun running, for example, then I have an obligation to investigate. And if that investigation happens to shed light on a wrongful conviction, well, that's just good police work. Hope flickered in Garrett's chest. So you'll look into it? I'll send a telegram to Fort Grant, request their missing weapons inventory. I'll send deputies to Kane's trading post to verify your claims about the rifles. And I'll review David Fletcher's personal effects, including his journal, if Tom is willing to hand it over. Of course. Tom pulled the journal from his coat, placed it on the desk. But, Wyatt continued, his voice hardening, while I'm doing all that, you 3 are staying right here in Copper Ridge where I can keep an eye on you. No leaving town, no more midnight raids. You've done your part. Now let the law do its job. And Ashki? Ayasha asked, her voice tight with worry. What happened to my brother? If the evidence supports your story, I'll petition the territorial governor for a stay of execution pending a new investigation. Wyatt met her gaze. But I can't promise anything. The wheels of justice turn slow, and we've only got 16 days. It has to be enough, Garrett said quietly. Wyatt nodded. Get yourselves to the hotel. Clean up. Get some rest. I'll send word when I have news. They left the marshal's office and walked to the Copper Ridge Hotel, a two-story building with peeling paint and dusty windows. The clerk at the desk, a thin man with spectacles, gave Ayesha a long look but said nothing when Garrett paid for 2 rooms. "You should rest," Garrett said to Ayesha as they climbed the stairs. "Your shoulder needs time to heal." "I cannot rest," she said, "not while Ashki waits. We've done everything we can for now. The rest is up to Wyatt." She stopped at the top of the stairs, turned to face him. "You trust him, this marshal?" Garrett considered the question. "I think he's honest, and I think he'll investigate. Whether that's enough," he trailed off, not wanting to voice his doubts. Ayesha reached out, touched his arm. "Thank you for everything, for believing me, for helping me, for—" she struggled for the words, "for making me feel human again, not just weapon, not just survivor, human." The words hit Garrett harder than he expected. He looked at her, really looked at her, the exhaustion in her eyes, the hope fighting against despair, the strength that refused to break even when everything said it should. And he realized that somewhere in the last few days, this Apache woman had stopped being a stranger, stopped being a mission, and had become something else entirely, someone he cared about, someone who mattered. "You were always human, Ayesha," he said quietly. "Some people just forgot how to see it." She held his gaze for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Then she nodded and went into her room, closing the door softly behind her. Tom clapped Garrett on the shoulder. "Get some sleep, boss. You look like death." "So do you." "Yeah, well, I'm old. I'm supposed to look like death." Tom's expression sobered. "You think Wyatt will come through?" "I hope so. Because if he doesn't, we're going to have to do something a lot more dangerous than breaking into a trading post." Tom understood immediately. "You'd break Ashki out of Fort Grant. If it comes to that, yes." "That's suicide, Garrett. Fort Grant has a full garrison. We'd never make it out alive." "I know." Garrett looked at the closed door of Ayesha's room. "But I made her a promise, and I don't break my promises anymore." 3 days passed in agonizing slowness. 3 days during which Wyatt Donovan worked with methodical precision, sending telegrams, interviewing witnesses, reviewing evidence. 3 days during which Garrett paced the hotel like a caged animal, Tom checked his rifle obsessively, and Ayesha stood at her window watching the street as if expecting soldiers to come for her at any moment. On the 4th morning, Wyatt sent word, "Come to my office, now." Helen had insisted on coming with them to Copper Ridge. "I taught at the reservation for 3 years, she said firmly when Garrett tried to dissuade her. "I know how the Army treats Apache testimony. Ayesha will need someone who can verify her English is good enough to understand what she witnessed. That's me." Now, standing in the marshal's office while Colonel Pierce laid out the evidence, Helen watched Ayesha with fierce maternal pride. This girl, this survivor, had risked everything for her brother, had trusted strangers, had chosen to fight instead of run. When Ayesha's voice wavered during her testimony, Helen stepped forward. "The girl's English is clear enough for legal testimony. I'll swear to that in any court." Pierce nodded approvingly. "Mrs. Carter, your word carries weight. Thank you." Later, when they left the office, Ayesha caught Helen's hand. "Thank you for believing me, for helping." Helen squeezed back. "You're not alone anymore, child. None of you are. We're family now. That's what family does." They arrived to find the office crowded. Wyatt sat behind his desk, 2 deputies flanking him, and standing to the side in full-dress uniform was a man Garrett recognized immediately. Colonel Benjamin Pierce, commander of the Territorial Army Forces, 60 years old, ramrod straight, with white hair and a face carved from granite. Garrett had served under him briefly, a lifetime ago. "Mr. Rawlins," Pierce said, his voice formal, "it's been a long time." "Colonel." Garrett's mind raced, trying to figure out what this meant. Was Pierce here to arrest them? To defend Kane? "Marshal Donovan brought some disturbing allegations to my attention," Pierce continued. "Allegations concerning Sergeant Virgil Kane and irregularities in the case against the Apache prisoner Ashki." He pulled a folder from under his arm, opened it. "I've spent the last 3 days investigating. What I found is troubling." He laid several documents on the desk. The rifles in Kane's trading post match serial numbers from weapons reported missing from Fort Grant over the past 2 years. 73 rifles in total, street value approximately $8,000. Garrett's breath caught. $8,000, a fortune. "Furthermore," Pierce continued, "I reviewed the ballistics report on Private David Fletcher's death. The trajectory of the bullet does not match Sergeant Kane's testimony. The shot came from behind and below, consistent with someone kneeling or crouching, not from a standing position as Kane claimed." Tom's hands clenched into fists. "So Apache didn't kill David. The physical evidence suggests he could not have fired the fatal shot from where Kane placed him." Pierce's expression was grim. "I also reviewed Kane's duty logs from 12 years ago. The day of the raid on the Rollins homestead, Kane was duty officer. He received a scout's report warning of Apache war parties moving south. He logged the report, but he did not send riders to warn the settlements." The room went very quiet. Garrett felt like he was falling, like the ground had opened beneath him and he was tumbling into an abyss. "Why?" The word came out broken. "Why would he do that?" Pierce met his gaze with something that might have been sympathy. "I can't answer that, Mr. Rollins. But I can tell you that in the 6 months following that raid, Army funding for the territory increased substantially, and Sergeant Kane's quartermaster duties expanded significantly. More money flowing through his hands meant more opportunities for—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Creative accounting. He let my family die so he could steal more efficiently," Garrett said flatly. "I believe so, yes." The rage that swept through Garrett was cold and absolute. He turned toward the cells where Kane sat, rose from his chair. Tom grabbed his arm, held him back. "Don't," Tom said quietly. "He's not worth it." Garrett shook him off, but he did not move toward the cell. Instead, he looked at Pierce. "What happens now?" "Sergeant Kane will be court-martialed on charges of theft of government property, conspiracy to defraud, and murder," Pierce said. "The case against Apache will be reviewed. Based on the evidence, I'm recommending his conviction be overturned and he be released immediately." Ayesha made a sound, something between a sob and a gasp. She swayed on her feet. Garrett caught her elbow, steadied her. "My brother," she whispered. "He will live?" "If the review board agrees with my recommendation, yes," Pierce said. "And I believe they will. The evidence is overwhelming." From the cell, Kane finally spoke. His voice was hoarse, defeated. "It was all for nothing then. David Fletcher died for nothing. That woman Desba died for nothing. All of it for nothing." "No," Ayesha said, turning to face him. Her voice was stronger now, filled with a quiet fury. "They died because you are evil, because you choose money over life. But their death, not for nothing. Their death bring truth, bring justice. That is everything." Kane laughed, bitter and broken. "Justice. There's no such thing, girl, just winners and losers. And I lost." "You're right about one thing," Garrett said quietly. "You lost. But not because we beat you. You lost because you thought you could bury the truth forever, and the truth doesn't stay buried. Not forever." Wyatt stood up. "Colonel Pierce, what do you need from us?" "Statements from all 3 of you. Formal depositions for the court-martial." Pierce looked at Ayesha. "And you, miss, you'll need to testify. I know that won't be easy going back to Fort Grant. But your testimony about Kane's actions, about what you witnessed, will be crucial." "I will testify," Ayesha said without hesitation, her English still careful but stronger after days of practice with Helen. "I tell everything. About David, about Desba, about all people Kane hurt. I tell truth." Pierce nodded approvingly. "Marshal, I'm placing Sergeant Kane in your custody until the court-martial can be convened, should be within the week." "Understood, Colonel." Pierce turned to Garrett, extended his hand. "Mr. Rollins, I'm sorry. Sorry for what happened to your family. Sorry it took 12 years for the truth to come out. That's on the Army. That's on me. I should have looked closer at the time. Garrett shook his hand. You didn't know. I should have. That's my failure. Pierce's grip was firm, his gaze steady. For what it's worth, you did good work here. Dangerous work, illegal work in some cases, but good work. Justice was served even if it came the long way around. After Pierce left, Wyatt cleared the office except for Garrett, Tom, and Ayesha. He poured coffee for all of them, then sat on the edge of his desk. There's still the matter of the charges against you three, he said. Garrett's stomach tightened. What charges? Breaking and entering, theft of Army property, assault on a federal agent technically since Kane had a commission. Wyatt sipped his coffee. I could charge you. Probably should charge you. But, Tom prompted, but I'm a pragmatic man, and sometimes the law and justice don't quite line up perfectly. He set down his cup. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to file a report saying you came to me with information about Kane's activities. I'm going to say you cooperated fully with my investigation. And I'm going to neglect to mention the part where you broke into his trading post in the middle of the night and shot him. Why would you do that? Garrett asked. Because that Apache boy deserves to go free, because David Fletcher's mother deserves to know her son died honorably, and because sometimes, just sometimes, the ends justify the means. Wyatt fixed them with a hard stare. But if you ever pull anything like this again in my jurisdiction, I will throw the book at you so hard you'll be old men before you see daylight. We clear? Crystal, Tom said. Good. Now get out of my office. You make me nervous. They walked out into the morning sunshine. The street was busy now, people going about their daily business, unaware that justice had just been served in the marshal's office. Garrett felt strange, untethered. For 12 years he had carried the weight of Sarah and Daniel's deaths, the guilt of not being there, the unanswered questions about why it happened. And now, suddenly, he had answers. It did not bring them back. It did not undo the years of grief. But it gave him something he had not had before. Closure, understanding, and a sense that their deaths, however senseless, had at least been acknowledged, their killer identified, and brought to account. I need to write to my sister, Tom said quietly. Tell her about David, about what really happened. His voice cracked. Tell her that her boy died a hero, not just another casualty. She deserves to know, Garrett agreed. Tom nodded and walked away toward the telegraph office, leaving Garrett and Ayesha standing alone on the boardwalk. We did it, Ayesha said softly. Ashki will be free. Kane will pay. It is over. Almost over, Garrett corrected. You still have to testify. We still have to see it through to the end. Yes. She turned to face him fully. And then? Then you and Ashki can go wherever you want. Reservation, if you choose. Or somewhere else. You're free, Ayesha, truly free. She studied his face, her amber eyes searching for something. And if I want to stay? The question hung between them, weighted with possibility. Garrett's heart beat faster. Stay where? He asked carefully. Here, Copper Ridge, or, she hesitated, Rollins Ranch. Garrett felt like the ground had shifted beneath him again, but this time in a different way. Ayesha, you don't have to feel obligated. I helped you because it was right, not because I expected anything in return. I know this, she stepped closer, but I stay not because I owe you. I stay because, she struggled for the English words, her frustration evident, because when I'm with you, I not just survive. I live. You see me, not Apache, not savage, not prisoner, me, Ayesha. Garrett's throat tightened. He thought about the last few days, about the way Ayesha had fought beside him, trusted him, challenged him to be better than the hollow man he had become. He thought about the way she looked at him, not with pity for his loss, but with understanding, with recognition, as if she saw the parts of him he had thought died with Sarah and Daniel. I see you, he said quietly. And what I see is someone strong, someone brave, someone who deserves a life without running, without fighting, without fear. Then give me this life, she said simply. At ranch, with you. People will talk. A white rancher and an Apache woman, it's not common. It's not always accepted. I not care what people say. Do you? Garrett thought about that. Once he might have cared. Once he might have worried about propriety, about what the neighbors thought, about maintaining respectability. But that man had died 12 years ago in a burning homestead. The man standing here now had learned that life was too short and too precious to waste on other people's opinions. No, he said, I don't. Ayesha smiled, and it transformed her face. For the first time since he had met her, she looked not just strong but happy, genuinely, deeply happy. Then I stay, she said. I work. I earn place. I learn more English. I help Tom and Jesse and Helen, and maybe— She placed her hand over his heart, the same gesture she had made in the desert. Maybe I help you remember how to live too. Garrett covered her hand with his, felt the warmth of her skin, the calluses from hard work, the scars from hard living. This woman who had survived everything the world threw at her and somehow remained unbroken. This woman who had walked into his life like a desert storm and swept away the dust of 12 dead years. You already have, he said. Epilogue, where the heart finds home. The court-martial of Sergeant Virgil Kane lasted 3 days. Ayesha testified on the second day, her English still halting, but her testimony devastating. She described in clinical detail how Kane had murdered Desba, how he had given the order to shoot an unarmed woman who was trying to surrender, how he had laughed when she fell. The panel of officers looked ill by the time she finished. Kane was convicted on all charges: theft, conspiracy, murder. The sentence was death by hanging. On the third day, the board reviewing Ashke's case announced their decision. Conviction overturned. All charges dismissed. The boy was to be released immediately with a formal apology from the United States Army. Garrett was there when they brought Ashke out of his cell. The boy was thin, hollow-eyed, moving like a ghost. But when he saw Ayesha, something lit up inside him. He ran to her, and she caught him, held him, both of them speaking rapid Apache and crying. Garrett turned away, giving them privacy. Tom stood beside him, watching the reunion with wet eyes. That's what we fought for, Tom said quietly. That right there. Yeah, Garrett agreed. That's worth it. They stayed in Copper Ridge for a week while the paperwork was finalized, while Ashke recovered his strength, while the Army processed his release. Helen came to town with Jesse, bringing fresh clothes and supplies. Jesse took one look at Ashke and immediately started teaching him how to play cards, the universal language of young men everywhere. On the day they left for the ranch, Marshal Wyatt Donovan came to see them off. Heard Kane's hanging is scheduled for next month, he said to Garrett. You planning to attend? Garrett thought about it. Part of him wanted to be there, to see Kane pay for Sarah and Daniel, for David Fletcher, for Desba, for all the lives he had destroyed in his greed. But another part, the part that Ayesha had awakened, knew that watching Kane die would not bring anyone back, would not heal anything, would just be another ending in a story that needed to start looking toward beginnings. No, Garrett said finally. I've spent 12 years living with ghosts. I think it's time I started living with the living. Wyatt nodded approvingly. Wise choice. For what it's worth, Rollins, I'm glad things worked out the way they did. So am I. The ride back to Rollins Ranch took 2 days. Ashke rode with Ayesha, the siblings talking quietly in Apache, catching up on years of separation. Tom rode with Jesse, the older man telling stories about David that made the younger one laugh. And Garrett rode slightly apart, watching them all, feeling something he had not felt in so long he almost did not recognize it. Peace. They crested the last hill and saw the ranch spread out below. The adobe house, the barn, the corrals. Home. Helen stood on the porch waiting for them, and when she saw Ashke, her face broke into a smile. Well, don't just sit there, she called. Get down here and let me feed you. You look half-starved. That night they all gathered around the dinner table. Helen had cooked a feast, and they ate until they could not move. Ashki, his English almost non-existent, communicated through smiles and gestures. Jesse taught him how to say "thank you" and "more please," which Ashki used liberally. Tom told stories about his cavalry days, and Helen corrected him when he exaggerated too much. And Garrett sat at the head of the table, looking at the faces around him, and realized something profound. He had lost his family 12 years ago, but he had found a new one, not a replacement. Nothing could replace Sarah and Daniel, but a new beginning, a second chapter. After dinner, Garrett walked out onto the porch. The stars were brilliant overhead, the desert night cool and clear. He heard the door open behind him, knew without looking it was Ayasha. She stood beside him, not touching, just present. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then Ayasha said, "Ashki wants to learn ranching. He say he want to work, earn his place." "He already has a place, both of you do." "I know, but we are Apache. We do not take charity, we work. We contribute." She glanced at him. "Is this okay?" "More than okay. I can always use good hands. And if Ashki is anything like his sister, he'll be the hardest worker I have." Ayasha smiled at that, then her expression grew serious. "Garrett, I need to ask you something." "All right." "When you look at me, what you see? You see Apache? You see the woman you saved? Or you see—" She trailed off, searching for the words. "I see Ayasha," Garrett said simply. "I see a woman who is brave and strong and kind. I see someone who fought for her brother when no one else would. Someone who survived things that would break most people. Someone who made me remember that life is worth living even after loss." He turned to face her. "I see someone I care about deeply, more deeply than I thought I could care about anyone again." Her breath caught. "You care about me?" "Yes." "As friend?" Garrett smiled, and it felt strange on his face, like a muscle he had forgotten how to use. "As someone who could be more than a friend, if you wanted, if that's something you wanted." Ayasha stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the heat of her body, smell the sage and desert dust in her hair. Garrett reached into his vest pocket, pulled out the small daguerreotype he had carried every day since Sarah died. The silver frame caught the starlight. He looked at it one last time, really looked, at the faces of the people he had loved and lost. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly, "about Sarah." Ayasha's expression grew solemn. "You not have to." "I do." He held the photograph so she could see it. "This was my family, my first family, and I loved them with everything I had. When they died, I thought I died too." His voice roughened. "For years I felt guilty even thinking about being happy again, like it would dishonor their memory, like I'd be betraying them." Ayasha touched the frame gently, traced Sarah's face with one finger. She was beautiful, like sunrise. She was fierce, too, in her own way, stubborn, brave. She would have liked you, I think, would have respected your strength. Garrett paused, choosing his words carefully. "I want you to know what I feel for you. It's not because you remind me of her. You don't. You're completely different people. Then why you feel for me?" "Because you taught me something Sarah would have wanted me to learn. That loving again doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to live. It means honoring the past by not letting it destroy the future." He looked at the photograph one more time, then tucked it back into his pocket. But this time, it felt different. Not a chain, a blessing. "I think Sarah would want me to be happy, and you make me happy, Ayasha. Really, truly happy." Tears spilled down Ayasha's cheeks. "That is the most beautiful thing anyone ever say to me." "It's the truth." She placed her hand over his heart, felt it beating strong and steady. "Then I tell you truth too. I scared that I not enough. That you wake up one day and wish for a woman who speak better English, who know how to be proper wife, who not have scars and bad dreams. I don't want proper, I want you. Scars, bad dreams, broken English, all of it. Because that's who you are. And who you are is extraordinary." "You really believe this?" "With everything I am." "In Apache culture," she said quietly, "when a man wants to court a woman, he brings gifts to her family, proves he can provide, proves he is worthy. I don't know Apache customs very well. That is okay. I teach you. She placed her hand on his chest, right over his heart. But first, I need to know. You think of me as woman you could love, or woman who reminds you of what you lost? It was the question that mattered, the one that would determine everything. Garrett thought about Sarah, about the love they had shared, the life they had built. That love was real. That loss was real. And nothing would ever change that. But Ayesha was not Sarah. She was her own person, with her own strength, her own story, her own way of being in the world. And what Garrett felt for her was not a shadow of old love. It was something new, something different, something that honored the past without being imprisoned by it. I think of you as a woman I could love, he said, not instead of Sarah, alongside the memory of Sarah, as someone who taught me that loving again doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to live. Ayesha's eyes glistened with tears. That is good answer. Is it? Yes. Because I think of you as man I could love too, not because you saved me, because you saw me, and you chose to fight for what is right, even when it was hard, even when it hurt. She reached up, touched his face gently. My mother used to say, the heart has room for many loves, old loves, new loves, lost loves, found loves, all living together, all honored. That's wise. Apache women are wise. She smiled through her tears, also stubborn, also difficult sometimes. Garrett laughed, the sound rusty but genuine. I noticed. You still want to court me? More than anything. Then court me. She stepped back, formal suddenly. Bring gifts to my family. Prove you worthy. Follow Apache custom. Your family being Ashkey, and Helen, and Tom, and Jesse. They all family now. Garrett considered this. What kind of gifts? Horses are traditional, but I think... She tilted her head, considering. I think what my family really needs is promise. Promise that you will protect us, provide for us, treat us with respect. Her voice softened. Promise you will not see us as burden or charity, but as people worthy of place in your life. I can promise that. I do promise that. Then you have given greatest gift. She took his hand, laced her fingers through his, and I accept. They stood there on the porch, holding hands, looking out at the desert that had brought them together. Inward they could hear Helen scolding Jesse for eating the last piece of pie, hear Tom's laughter, hear Ashkey's hesitant attempts at English. It was not the life Garrett had planned. It was not the life he had lost, but it was a good life, a life worth living, a life built on truth and justice and second chances. Ayesha, Garrett said quietly. Yes? Thank you. For what? For riding into my life, for reminding me what it means to fight for something, for showing me that endings can also be beginnings. She squeezed his hand. You did same for me. We save each other. And that, Garrett realized, was the truest thing either of them had said. They had saved each other, not from bounty hunters or corrupt sergeants or unjust convictions, though they had done that too. They had saved each other from the worst kind of prison. The prison of a life unlived, of potential unrealized, of hearts too afraid to beat again. 6 months later, on a spring morning when the desert bloomed with wildflowers, Garrett Rollins and Ayesha stood before their assembled family, Tom and Helen and Jesse and Ashkey, and spoke vows in both English and Apache. It was a small ceremony, unconventional, probably scandalous by the standards of Copper Ridge society. Garrett did not care. Ayesha did not care. They had learned that life was too short to waste on other people's narrow definitions of how things should be. They had learned that love, real love, transcends culture and convention. They had learned that family is not just blood. It is choice. It is commitment. It is showing up day after day for the people who matter. Jesse stood at the edge of the small gathering, watching Garrett and Ayesha exchange vows. His chest ached, but it was a good ache. The ache of seeing something right happen, even if it wasn't happening to him. Tom appeared beside him, handed him a flask. "You did good, boy," stepping back, letting them find each other. Jesse took a sip, handed it back. "Wasn't like I had a choice. She never saw me that way." "No, but you could have made it ugly, could have caused problems. You didn't. That shows character. Doesn't make it hurt less." "No," Tom agreed, "but it makes you a man, a good man, the kind some smart woman is going to be real lucky to find someday." Jesse managed to smile. "You think?" "I know, trust me. I've been around long enough to recognize quality when I see it." As Garrett kissed Aisha, as the small crowd cheered, Jesse raised the flask in a silent toast to love found, to heartbreak survived, to moving forward. Then he turned and walked back toward the barn, where there was work to be done and a future to build, one day at a time. And as Garrett kissed his new wife, as Ashkey whooped in celebration and Helen cried and Tom clapped him on the back, Garrett sent a silent thank you to Sarah and Daniel. "Thank you for the love you gave me. Thank you for the lessons you taught me. And thank you for letting me go, letting me live again, letting me find joy in unexpected places." Because that, ultimately, was what the dead wanted for the living. Not eternal mourning, not frozen grief, but life. Full, messy, complicated, beautiful life. And Garrett Rollins, rancher, widower, survivor, was finally truly living again. The wild Apache girl no man could tame had not been tamed at all. She had simply found a man who did not want to tame her, who wanted to stand beside her, not above her, who wanted to build a life with her, not for her. And together they built something stronger than either could have built alone, a home, a family, a future. And that was justice enough. The end.